Hello guys there, welcome to Ryan Kaplan's, or my channel, and basically today we're going to do Cold War episode 1. This is Gcse Cold War 9-1 syllabus on the Edexcel course. Basically I hope you are all okay and you're coping well in the COVID-19 situation. I know it's very tough. Personally today I had quite a struggle just trying to do different things, so that was a bit annoying because you always really want to do something, but I think we just keep going and it will soon be over hopefully, so I hope you're doing well. But on the actual topical front, this is the Cold War episode 1. Basically I'll be going through the Cold War syllabus Gcse standard, and this will help you to understand different parts of the Cold War. This shouldn't be replacing your teachers or any learning that you actually do in class based on the Cold War. It's just accompanied with a summary of what you need to know for your exams, whether that be next year, obviously this year is called off, or in the future, or just for basically your own convenience and knowledge. The first thing I would like to say is this book by John Lewis Gaddis called The Cold War. It's a very good, insightful book offering different perspectives and interpretations from the Soviet Union and US based on their policies during the Cold War. It has lots of different images and evidence which can be found in documents that were released after the Cold War period, which was from 1945 to 1991, and those documents are very insightful into what was going on behind the scenes during the Cold War. So John Lewis Gaddis does a very good summary, and then within that analysis of those different interpretations and perspectives and how they conflict and also agree with each other. So yes, make sure you, if you want a further reading, then you should go and look at that book. I think it's about £10 on Amazon. So yeah, definitely a recommendation for some further reading if you're interested, that is. You probably should watch the first episode of this to see if you actually think it should be something you should do in your spare time. But yeah, let's get started. So basically, the first thing you need to know about the Cold War is there were two ideologies at war in some sense. So you had communism, which was advocated by the Soviet Union, and it's basically the idea of everyone had to share the country's wealth. So it was an equal share, equal rights, property rights. The jobs weren't so equal, but everyone had a role to play within the country, and that role was equally valuable for everyone's communities, separate communities, and the whole national community. And this idea of everyone equal really attracted a lot of other countries, apart from maybe Russia, which we would call the Soviet Union today. So lots of other countries in Eastern Europe became attracted to this, and that helped the Soviet Union to expand their own sort of circle and barrier around their own country, and that spread of communism was disliked by the Western powers, who, like the US, were capitalist. And the capitalists basically had different tiers of business, and those different tiers of businesses meant that people were not entirely equal in what money they could earn or what presence they had in the society in terms of people listening to them. So basically, most industries and businesses were privately owned and not owned nationally. So there's a lot of competition, more competition there would be in communist countries, although the advantages of that is that those people in those private companies would have been wealthier and more well off, although that leads to greater disparity with the poorer people within the country. And a lot of this came from the trade that they did with other countries and external links such as the UK and France, and that capitalist movement towards trade with Europe really put them more as a European power against the Soviet Union. Whereas the Soviet Union tried to encourage communism, the US used their trade to sort of link and funnel through this capitalist approach, which they thought would be the key to global success in the coming years. And that's the two sort of ideologies that are at work, and most people remember the Cold War as the US versus the Soviet Union, or the USSR as some people call it. And these two ideologies being in conflict led to lots of conferences that happened just before the end of World War II and afterwards as well. So the first one happened in 1943, where it was called the Tehran Conference, and Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union, Roosevelt, the leader of the United States, and Churchill, obviously the current, at the time Prime Minister of the UK, all met and they agreed that a second front, so a second mobilising line, army, basically wave during the World War II, would be opened in France in May 1944 to try to combat against the Nazis that were stationed there already. The hope was that this would be the end of the war, as the Nazis were already starting to retreat and lose their territory which they had gained earlier. The other agreements that happened at this conference was that a United Nations organisation would be set up after the World War II. Basically the UN exists today, and it was a planned success for how countries would be able to ask for funding and responses from bigger, wealthier countries in order to try and recover from the damages that World War II caused. The last conflict, well, the agreement that came from the conflict basically was about Poland's borders. And Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union, wanted a part of Eastern Poland to be part of the Soviet Union. And this wasn't liked by Roosevelt or Churchill, but they did agree to it resentfully, just to try and keep the peace moving forward so that they could have other conferences, such as the Yalta Conference in February 1945, which it was sort of the turning point, because now they were very confident that the war would end in their victory. So they were planning to divide Germany and Berlin, the capital of Germany, into 4 zones. And basically this meant that the Soviet Union would control one part of these zones in the whole of Germany, and then one part of Berlin, and so would France, UK and the US. And this meant that even though there were separate areas and they were all within the same country, they couldn't intervene in other areas. And this did lead to separate ideologies being implemented very, very close together. And there was a lot of internal conflicts within the German people after World War II, because a lot of them were being influenced either by the Soviet Union or the US, but not both. And then they realised of this influence in other parts, and they became very resentful, and families were broken up, quite physically by the borders, but also by things that people were learning and saying about why they think we should be doing things this way to try and improve Germany. So it was a massive monumental shift for the German people at the time. The positive that came out of the Yalta conference was that many countries would be allowed to have free elections after World War II, and this would be something that the US especially would try to implement and ensure that many people in these liberated countries from not liberated countries would be allowed to have a choice and feel worthy again after being under Nazi occupation. Although this free elections idea wasn't really put into practice, and the other idea that wasn't really put into practice was the set figure of reparations that Germany would have to pay, because Stalin wanted a higher figure of reparations to really compound the guilt that Germany had to take following World War II, whereas Roosevelt and Churchill didn't want that higher figure. They thought that if they gave Germany a lower figure, it would be a punishment in some way, but it wouldn't set them back many, many years of development. So that was a minor disagreement, although it was settled a bit further later on. And this basically meant that now the conferences were becoming more relevant and they were becoming more practical, because the end of the Second World War was happening now. There was a very, very clear divide between communism and capitalism within the US and the Soviet Union. And Churchill, who was in the middle of this sort of triangle, was very suspicious of Stalin's motives behind him wanting to expand communism. And this was highlighted at the Potsdam Conference of July 1945, where it was agreed that Germany would have to pay reparations in equipment and materials. However, Stalin still wanted massive compensation from Germany, and the newly elected president of the US, Truman, refused, and he saw a revived Germany as a possible barrier to further Soviet expansion. So his idea was that if Germany was able to get back on their feet, it could block any Soviet influence that was coming from the east over to the western parts of Europe. And the idea of the free elections was a further implication of this, and Churchill was on board with Truman's idea that there should be a barrier of some sort because they were wary of the Soviet influence that was growing. And again, Stalin didn't agree with that because he thought, well, if our country is growing and our influence is growing, that's not a problem, because all we're trying to do is help countries get back on their feet. However, further down the line, it would be seen that this was part of a bigger plan to get the communist ideology spread throughout the whole world, for the benefit of the Soviet Union only, so they could be able to control their satellite states, what they were called. Although there is an alternative view that the US was trying to do the same at the time, and this is really where the conflict lies and where the Cold War started. So for the first topic of the origins of the Cold War, this is the moment from 1943 to 1945 that the differences were laid out on the table, and Stalin, Roosevelt / Truman and Churchill all inputted in this conflict. Also agreements, but mostly conflict. And the world leaders of other countries were able to see that there was something starting to happen in the wake of the World War II. And that was a really, really big disappointment for a lot of people, because a lot of people hoped that there'd be a lot of unity after World War II, and many countries will try to work together. However, this was highlighting that actually lots of countries didn't want to work together, and they were only really satisfied by their own selfish interests. And this was not a drive towards international unity, it was a drive towards isolated unity. Basically, the Soviet Union would be unified with its own Soviet satellite empire, so would the US if they got any more influence in the Western Europe. And yeah, that's basically the origins of the Cold War, the first part. So yeah, that's basically the first episode today. Thank you for watching.